Three, two, one, and we're live. Hello, hello, hello. Hi, and welcome to Content Club, where we're going to go through some interesting and valuable things today to do with, framing, actually, to do with getting your image looking good. I should be live across LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube all at the same time. If you're there, drop me a little hello, how you doing, that kind of thing. Let me know you're there. I'll try and fit some questions in at the end if you've got any. We're just going to be here for about 15 or 20 minutes today. A little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to be doing this more often from now on, but probably mostly in the Facebook group. There's a new Facebook group for Content Club where I'll be going live probably twice a week. I will be doing occasional ones, maybe every week on LinkedIn and across Facebook as well, across YouTube as well. But really, Facebook is the place to go if you want to keep up with stuff. There's the address just down there at the bottom. So if you want to go and join the Facebook group, you haven't already, if you're not watching on Facebook now, hop on over, join the Content Club on Facebook. It's called Content Club RVT. That means remote video team at the end. And there's lots of kind of good stuff going to be coming up over the next couple of months there. So what are we going to be looking at today? Well, we're going to be looking at some framing, just getting our framing right. And I decided to do this for two reasons, really. One, because I have seen so many people get it wrong, and it's a really simple thing. And it really just requires a little bit of a tweak, and you can get your video looking much, much better. And the other reason is because I actually made a mistake on one of my videos, like, I don't know, a week or two back, a couple of weeks ago when I created it. It was a slightly more complex setup, which is why I made the mistake. And also there was a reason why I made it as well. So I thought I'd just run through that and I'll show you how I fixed it as well, because that's a really useful thing to be able to do. So we're going to make a start in just a second. Let me just quickly check the feeds and make sure everything's running nice and smoothly. I can see we're live there we go, we're on Facebook and we're running on LinkedIn as well. Okay, so let's make a start. There are a couple of things I want to talk about today when it comes to framing. First of all, I want to probably start at the beginning and go over some really common framing mistakes. Now, when you set the camera up to film yourself or to film other people, there's really usually two different kind of scenarios that you're going to have to deal with. The first is if you're filming yourself, and in that situation, generally people just look straight down the lens of the camera like this, and they kind of set themselves in the middle of the frame. There isn't really much else you need to know about that. As long as you haven't got loads of headroom above your head or a massive gap above your head, you're fine. So where it gets slightly more complicated is where we step into things like narrative. If you're creating something which is kind of driven by narrative, maybe two people having a conversation, or if you're doing interviews. And the rules are actually kind of similar for both. So we're going to touch on both of those things today. That's where I'm going to focus the attention today, because I think that's where things can get a little bit tricky. So the first thing I want to do is just show you a quick shot of or a quick slide, which is going to show you some good and bad ways to frame up for an interview, for a basic interview. And really what we're talking about here is something called the rule of thirds. And when we talk about the rule of thirds, if you've done any photography, if you know anything about photography, then you'll have heard of it. You may have heard of it anyway. Essentially, what it involves is framing up your subject to the left or to the right of the screen. However, it's amazing how many people don't do that when they start setting video up. Let me show you what I mean. Let's hop over to the slides here. So quite often when we're talking about rule of thirds, let's get rid of this. There we go. Quite often when we're talking about rule of thirds or talking about framing up for video, the first thing that people do is they think that they need to be in the middle of the screen. Now, like I said, if you're presenting to camera, then yes, that's a great thing you can do just to kind of set yourself up in the middle of the screen like that. However, if you're interviewing someone, you can see pretty much from our first image here that if you've got them looking off to the side of the camera at the interviewer, which is the usual way that we would do something like that, then suddenly it doesn't feel quite right. And quite often that's because the picture isn't really balanced. They're looking out of the edge of the frame. And if they're set in the middle of the frame there, it kind of feels a little bit weird, a little bit clunky. Another thing that people do at the same time really as doing that is that they leave quite a lot of headroom at the top above their head. So that first image kind of encapsulates both of those two different kind of errors. First of all, they're looking, they've centered themselves in the shot. Second of all, they've got quite a lot of headroom at the top there. And what they've done essentially is put their face in the middle of the screen. And that kind of makes sense why you'd want to do that. They've taken maybe the idea from doing selfies or from doing your own video, but because it's an interview, the rules are different, right? So we don't want that first example. The second example is, well, come back to this in a second, actually, when I show you the next diagram. But what we've done here is just framed up on the, we've used the rule of thirds. We framed up on one side of the shot, but it's the wrong side of the shot. And we can tell because they're looking out of the edge of the screen, out of the wrong side of the frame. So that, again, feels kind of unbalanced. And you've got all that space, that negative space on the right-hand side there, which isn't really doing anything. On the third shot across the top there, really that's just too wide. And that's another common mistake. And it's quite common when you're using mobile phones, because mobile phones don't really zoom in very well. So you need to either move that camera closer to the subject, or you need to use a zoom lens and just zoom in slightly. The only problem really with using a wide shot like that is that a lot of times these days people are watching on mobile and their screens are already quite small. And if you have a shot that's wide like that, if you look at the size of my face in that shot compared to the whole of the rest of the shot, it's about the size of my thumbnail. It's not really big enough to kind of really connect with the facial expressions and the emotions that are happening. And that's really important with video. That's one of the benefits of video, that you can connect in that kind of way. So don't shoot something that's too far away like that, because you'll just lose the audience interaction a little bit. You'll lose that connection with the audience and with the subject. In the fourth and final shot, which is on the second row at the bottom there on the left, another common problem is that if you are shooting an interview, you quite often, you've put the camera to the one side or the other, but you've put it too far over. And the result of that is that you're really just filming the side of the head. And there's two problems there. One is you're really only capturing a kind of a profile when you want to see an open face. Secondly, you'll see in that shot there, you can only really see one of my eyes. You can't even see both of my eyes. So again, you're disconnecting from the audience slightly. You're losing the full facial connection, the full facial features and expressions, and you're kind of just filming the side of the head. So you want to bring that camera around a little bit so that it's facing the subject a little bit more, and you're going to get a better shot for it. So the last two are good examples. We've got the one in the center there that's framed to the right or to the left, depending on how you've done it. We've got just a head and shoulders shot there, which we'd call a mid shot. And then the one to the right of that, at the very last one, and that's a close-up. And it can't be understated really how nice a close-up is. Certainly on things like mobile and with interview and stuff like that, you really want to get in nice and close on some of those shots so that you can see that full expression. And you could go in almost even closer than that, actually. You can create a really nice, intimate kind of feeling by doing that. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. I'm going to show you, this actually applies to more of a dramatic sort of scenario as well, if you were filming two actors or two people talking to each other. So you might have that if you were, well, in the example that I'm about to show you, but also if you were doing an interview where you maybe had two different cameras and you were filming the interviewer and the interviewee at the same time. But there's a rule that we need to pay attention to if we're doing that, and I'm going to come on to that in a second as well. Let me just quickly show you from above what the, yeah, there we go. Oh, we don't want to go onto that one just yet. So this is kind of what it would look like in an interview. And this is a pretty simple interview. It's a one-camera interview. We would have the interviewer and the interviewee face-to-face. As in having a conversation. That's where you're going to get the most natural results. So you're making eye contact with the interviewer if you're the interviewee, and the camera is then off to one side. It's either on the left or the right hand side, close to the shoulder of the interviewer. And that's going to give us our looking across the lens like we were looking at in those last two examples. So you would frame that up so that you're getting a nice rule of thirds kind of balance there as well. Now, these days, I can't remember the last time I shot with two cameras. People used to shoot interviews a lot with two cameras so that you could get that flip reverse view, or so that you could get a different angle so that when you cut it, when you edit it, you've got two different angles and you can cut them together. I don't do that anymore for reasons I'll explain in a minute. It's mostly because it's a lot easier just to use one camera and to shoot in a higher resolution, and I'll show you how that works in a second. So one of the troubles that you can run into, though, if you use two cameras, is something called the 180-degree rule, and this is good video production or film production theory that you'll learn about if you do any video production courses, if you've done them in the past, or if you read about this kind of thing in the past. It's called the 180-degree rule, and what it means is that you really only got a certain space that you can position two cameras in, otherwise you're going to run into problems. And if you can look at this diagram's from above, it shows you where you can use your cameras to shoot two different characters and where the problem areas are if you then move into that other area. So we've got this bottom half, which is the 180 degrees that we can use, and we can position the camera pretty much at any place within that 180 degrees. The three cameras that you've got there are probably the most common places that you would do it. So over somebody's shoulder on someone's face, over somebody else's shoulder on their other face on the same side, or more of a profile shot where you're looking at both from that bottom camera there. If we move that camera into the top half of that section, we're going to run into problems, because what's going to happen is the angle of their face is going to change from looking this direction to looking this direction. And that's going to create confusion for the viewer when you cut it together, because instead of two people having a conversation in the same direction, like towards each other, suddenly now there's an angle shift and they look like they're not really looking at each other in the eye. So this is all about using tricks and techniques to let the viewer understand what's happening better, and we have to be careful there to make sure that those techniques are right. Otherwise, we can confuse the viewer, and it's not something that you might even think about before you set your camera up. But if you shoot it wrong, it's going to look odd. You might not even be able to understand why it looks odd, but it will look really odd. So let me show you a real world example of where I have actually broken this rule in the last 2 weeks. So I'm going to hop on over to my edit suite here. We'll just share this screen with you now as well. Okay, so some of you may have seen this video that I rolled out on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, or last week, I think, and I think it's also on YouTube. I'll get it up there if it's not. And what you probably saw was a conversation between two people like this. So I've got two characters in this. They're both me, obviously. But I wanted people to kind of feel like there were two different characters and that they were communicating with each other. Now, this is I've set this up as I originally shot it rather than how I fixed it. What you can see is that I shot a one rule of thirds character like this, based on one side of the frame, and then I went to shoot the other one and I framed it up like this. And there's the problem immediately. We've basically got two people on the same side of the camera. Now, one of the reasons I made this mistake, and I'll tell you so that you hopefully don't make it yourself, is that when you flip out a screen on a camera, so my camera has a little flip out screen so I can see what I'm doing, everything's kind of in reverse. So you've actually got to flip your brain round and kind of figure out how things are working the other way around compared to the flip out screen that you're looking at. So it's a little bit complicated, but it's just something that you want to pay attention to. So I landed up shooting both of these in the same direction. Problem, okay? What I actually needed to do was have our first character, let's go back here quickly. The character that we can see on the screen here, I needed to have at least one of the characters facing the other direction. So fortunately, there is something that you can do in that situation to fix that issue. And most edit suites will allow you to do this. I'm working in Premiere here, but if you check most reasonably advanced or even sort of basic edit suites, they'll allow you to flip or reverse images within the settings. To do it in Premiere, you go to your effects and you go to, you can type in flip actually, and you can do a horizontal or a vertical flip, which you then just drag out onto the clip that you want to work on. That will work. I've already done that on this clip. So we can go up to our clip, click on this clip here and go up to our settings. And down in the settings on the right here, you'll see that there's a horizontal flip. I've actually disabled this at the moment so that we can see how it works. I'm going to undisable it so we can see what happens. And you can see that the face flips like that, that the image is flipped. Now, when we toggle between these two shots, you can see that it's much more conversational. We've got a situation where it feels like one person is talking to the other as you cut those things together, okay? You will find, interestingly actually, that you look different. If in this situation, this is two versions of me, because of the way the face works, if you flip something, actually, because faces are never even, one side of the face is slightly different from the other. So if you flip it, the person does actually look slightly different. Probably not noticeable to most eyes, but they will look slightly different. So it's not something that you want to rely on. If you can, you need to get it right. But obviously, it's a fix if you run into an issue. So we've now got that, and that works. And then I had to just go through on the same character all the way through the project and just apply that same effect so that the same thing happens all the way through. Okay. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Has anybody got any questions at this stage? No. Okay, well, if you have, I think my comments are, oh, look, hold on. I've got comments up here that I haven't loaded. Okay, great. So there's one other thing that I mentioned at the beginning of this live, and I'm just going to touch on it now. Really, we're moving more into editing here, and I wanted to keep this more around the actual production and filming side of things. But it's useful to know when you're filming things, what you can do in the edit suite, because it does then sometimes change what you film and how you film it. So you'll see in this particular sequence here that I've got a range of wide shots and close-ups. This could be the same in an interview. We could move from wide shots to close-ups like we looked at in those last final two good examples on that previous graphic. First of all, it gives you a bit of dynamic. It means that you can sort of, not all the shots are the same, so you can move in close and you can get a different view and then you can move out. But more importantly, it allows you edit points. It allows you a place where if you need to cut something out, that you can remove something, cut to a close-up, and then that looks like a smooth cut. It doesn't look like you've ever actually removed anything from there. If you've got one shot and then you cut to the next shot, then you've got a little jump there. People do that quite a lot now with social media videos, but if you want something that looks a little bit smoother and a little bit more fluent and less noticeable, then you want to change the shot from a wide to a close, for example. So how are we going to do that? Well, we could use two cameras. Like we spoke about before, we could have one camera that's on a close-up and one camera that's on a wide angle. Problem with that is you've then got two lots of media that you need to put together, and that's complicated. You've got to make sure they're in sync. It's two lots of data. It's two lots of moving things around. It takes a little bit more time. So what I tend to do these days is, certainly with interviews when I'm shooting with one camera, is I just use a post-production zoom. So, for example, in this shot here, if I wanted to turn that into a close-up, I can click on the shot, I can go up to scale here, and I can zoom right in on that shot, and we can just reposition it a little bit with our positioning tools at the top. And now we've got a close-up. And all that basically means is that you can just rely on one batch of media, and that you can zoom in and zoom out as you want in post-production by using those tools. The only thing that I would say about doing that is that you probably want to shoot in 4K. Because if you do that with a 1080 piece of media, or a lower res kind of standard HD piece of media, you'll find by the time you zoom in, it starts to get a bit crunchy and the quality starts to get a little bit off. So if you think you're going to be doing that, shoot in 4K, then you've got loads of room to zoom in and zoom out. You'll retain the resolution and things are all going to look great. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of an insight into framing, into getting things right, the 180-degree rule. why you can't break that. If you break that, you run into the problems which I've shown you physically there. If you're framing up yourself or an interview or anyone on camera, just remember to close up that headroom, get them balanced on one side. Don't move the camera too far round so that you're getting their profile shot, and you'll be absolutely rolling with it. So I hope that's been useful today. Remember that there'll be more videos like this coming up in the Facebook group. Let me pop that quickly up on the screen again for you, so you've got it. No, not that one, this one. There we go. Banners, there we go. Facebook groups. I can't see any immediate questions here, but I'm running about 10 little screens at the moment. So I'll go back through in a second and just check in. So hang around for 5 minutes after this live, or I'll check in later on with them as well. And if you've got any questions, then I'll do my best to answer them for you. Thanks very much for now. I'll see you again soon. Yeah, good luck with all your content creation. I hope it's been useful. Cheers for now. Bye-bye.